welcome everybody. We have a full house today, so we're just holding back for a few minutes to see as everybody comes online. But we welcome you to another of our TET Dialogues, which is our fourth in the series. And as TET, as Thornton Education Trust, we have just been going for under a year. We established it a year ago. So just quickly to say what we're about. We're about really simply, our thing is empowering the next generation of city makers. And that is meaning every youth as opposed to every young architect. Architecture affects everyone, yet it is the one thing that is not embedded in our children's lives. Young people's voices are not really established and often excluded from discussions on urban design particularly, and also about excluded and away from the subject in school curriculum because it doesn't sit particularly anywhere in the school curriculum. Of course, we know that young people have a vested interest in their own neighbourhoods, and yet really are not part of that long-term engagement process. So this is why, as TET, our platform is to empower the next generation of city makers. Doing that is quite a big challenge in a way, but we actually believe you could do a small action, you get a big impact. And so what we're looking at is embedding young youth-led design approaches within architecture and urban design practice, which in a way is what we're discussing today. Encourage joined up thinking and sharing of resources, and that's really important because you can share knowledge, and that's best way of creating really good examples. We want to capacity build within the built environment sector. So our ambition is that every practice or company within the built environment embeds engagement with young people through social value. Again, we're doing that today, and demonstrate that architectural learning gives valuable skills, opportunities and knowledge to children and young people. And we're doing that through our schools, Architecture into Education Schools Award Scheme, which we'll be setting up in the next month. And of course, creating a lasting impact on the design process and the communities involved. And of course, inspiring the creation of future generation of practitioners. And as very lastly, though we do come from the sort of bottom up, we want to encourage informed government policy. So these are just a few actions we want to do. We hope they will have a major impact. But we really, in doing so, we want to close the gap between architecture and education and embed architecture into young people's education and to embed young people into architecture. And there's different ways we're able to do that. So the other area we have been looking at is the awards, Inspire Future Generation Awards, which we established last year in our inaugural, and that showed the incredible amount of practice going on, examples, and the just work that's been delivered throughout the country. And it shows that there is not only a thirst, a need for this, and some of those type of things we'll hear a bit more today. But the other way is through the TET Dialogues, as we say. And these have been a monthly form to create this platform where we can share knowledge, experience, learn from each other, and properly have a discussion of what are the kind of key issues that are relevant to us, be you as practitioners, or being local government or practices. So there's been many ways we've been doing this with TET Dialogue. So I'm very pleased today to see here our panelists, and it's going to be chaired by Hilary here, Satchwell, who's Principal and Director of Tibbalds Partnership. So without any more ado, I will hand over to Hilary, and please use the chat room for questions, but again, Hilary will explain that. So let's just have a good discussion, and we will be recording this afterwards, so there will be a proper copy of it. So thanks very much, everybody.
Brilliant, thank you, Victoria. Great. So as Victoria said, I'm Hilary Satchwell. I'm an architect and master planner by background, but I work very closely with the planning system, and I work on a range of urban estate regen and large scale housing growth projects. And lots of these involve talking to different people of different ages, which is a very interesting part of my work. So this evening's TET Dialogue is about social value in young people, and I really want us to think about what motivates us to get involved in understanding what young people want from projects and how we can support them, both directly and indirectly through the work that we do. Social value definitely seems to be a key topic of the moment, and I think that's increasingly clearly about because we're thinking that the physical environment alone is not enough. It's how places actually work, which is to do with the physical environment, but actually it's to do with other economic, social, and a whole range of factors that influence whether people will engage and whether they feel something is for them, which is a really key point for young people. So we cannot, as architects, urban designers, engineers, impact on projects after they're delivered, very often, but we can impact how they're designed and how they're developed with and for those that live in or live near those projects. And that, I think, is where the social value opportunity really sits. So I'm hoping that through today's talks, we'll hear a bit more about what our speakers think social value is and why it's important for young people. And my particular areas of interest, I think, are there's three ways of looking at this. So it's working with young people, how we can, by working with them, make built environment projects themselves better, make them more responsive to young people's needs, how the process of working with young people, how those conversations, how their involvement in the project can also help them make sense of the changing world around them and where they can have influence and why it's important that they have a voice. And then the third thing I think that's a way of us doing this work is around growing young people's understanding of what the built environment is, what it can change, how it can influence how we all live, and so that some of them might consider careers in these areas and how they can then make a difference. That may not be the particular focus, but it's important that we consider all of those things. Victoria raised an interesting question when we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, which was about whether some practices, some types of organisations are more open to thinking about the social value of projects, and so maybe more motivated to do this. And I think this is a really interesting question. So Tibbalds is an employee-owned company. I'm interested in, does that change how we think about these things? Is that why we're interested? Or does the fact that we're interested in talking to young people and communities, is that also why we might be employee-owned? So maybe some of the speakers might reflect on how their organisation thinks about these issues, not just how it sits in their projects. But why do we get involved in social value? So some projects are required and practices are required to do it as part of a tender. You get told to fill in a social value questionnaire and you tell them how many workshops you'll do with schools and how many different types of events and activities you'll do. Some organisations really specialise in the projects that they do, and particularly in working with young people. And other organisations set up programmes independent of specific projects or clients to think about young people. And I think all of these things are really valid and have the potential to make a much richer project experience and outcome. And I hope we'll hear a little bit more about that from our speakers today. I think there is a big difference between who is motivated to do this, and I'm always really interested in the question of public good and whether a project in its outcome or its process is thinking about how it might benefit public good. Really, I think of myself as an urban designer, not as an architect, so I'm interested in how all the buildings and spaces fit together, and that way that the public realm and the public environment works, rather than necessarily what the inside of a building is doing. And this relates to our work at Tibbalds. So our focus is very much on what we call people-friendly places. And for this is about both the process of the change of making a project happen and bringing it about, but also how the outcome will focus on people's needs and what they want from the environment that they live around. It helps us think about the social good, how we're trying to make places better in the first place. The outcome of a project and its positive impact on people's lives is, after all, what drives me particularly to be involved in this kind of work. And I think those considerations bring us back very neatly to the concerns and preoccupations of young people. I particularly enjoy working with young people on projects, and we've tried out a whole range of ways of doing this at Tibbalds. The one I often talk about, which is maybe not that successful, is me hanging out in a skate park probably isn't that good a way of talking to young people. You maybe need someone who knows how to skate to do that. But other things about getting young people involved in projects to design interventions into the places that they live, to think about why things are as they are. We've got a big long running project at the moment where we've set up an internship programme paid at London Living Wage for young people to think about how they might progress, built environment careers, how we can offer work experience. And we've been running a summer programme, an autumn programme of workshops, design with a group of young designers. Most of them won't go into design professions, but they're interested in how they can shape part of where they live. And that's been a really, really interesting process. But there's one other point I just quickly want to mention. Quite a lot of what goes into social value and engagement work is very, very time consuming. And it would be really good to hear from our speakers that this isn't something that is a quick fix. I've done one meeting, I've engaged with all those young people, it's absolutely fine. To understand the kind of the resource and timing implications of getting some of that great feedback and those conversations that you need where people trust you and that they know that you will listen to their concerns. It's not a quick fix, but it is a really important thing to do. So I'd be really interested to hear our speakers' reflection on that. So today we're going to hear from 4 great speakers about their experience of working with young people in delivering and developing social value and what their projects and they have learned through this process. I hope we'll hear about why they've developed programs and projects to do this and really actually where it's had an impact. So that's what I'd really like to hear about, but we'll see. The first thing I'd like to do is just remind everyone to use the chat to put your questions in, because that's the only place that I can see your questions, and we'll go through those as we get there. And make sure that we can all hear and have a good lively discussion about where we get to. And then I'd like to hand over to our first speaker, who is Claire Pollock, who is Partnerships Lead at Alford Hall Monaghan Morris. And we'll come back to questions at the end. So over to Claire.
Hi, thank you, Hilary. I mean, that was quite a lot of pressure with those questions. I've actually got quite a straightforward show and tell about the work that we do. Am I sharing? Sorry to ask. Am I sharing? Yes, you are.
Yes, you are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry to be a Zoom idiot. So yes, I mean, I'm just going to talk about external programs that we engage with for children and young people, our own activities. And also I'm going to touch on a couple of formal social value commitments, which is kind of stuff you're talking about, Hilary, which you do in response formally to projects. And I'm going to just also end on a fun one that we've just finished. I'm going to do all that in 8 minutes, so I'm going to get going. So we're a large practice. There's over 500 of us. The practice has been going for 30 years. It's got very well established kind of philanthropic corporate responsibility work. I'm the lead for the partnerships area, which is all this kind of work. And the work falls into 4 topics: humanitarian, community, climate action, and education and learning. And there's lots of information on our website saying a lot more about those other strands, which are really interesting as well, but I will move on. So in terms of working with young people, we have 3 clear aims around why we do it and why we think it's valuable and find the time. As Hilary was saying, it can be quite a lot of time, but it's really very enjoyable and important work. So it's around ensuring the profession's inclusive and diverse, and also, as Victoria was saying, that sort of sense that not all young people will be architects. It's really important to have an understanding of how the built environment is formed and different spaces and how they work, affect our lives. And also we like to support innovative education practice, so other organisations doing really interesting innovative stuff. So this is a list of what we supported last year. And we like to, with our partnerships, we tend to give money. We also like to give time through volunteering and skills sharing. And we also like to work with organisations and partners over a number of years, because it's really important. It's not kind of fly in, fly out approach, but we can kind of work to support organisations and have a dialogue about the best way to do that. So there's all kinds of things, you know, from the national programs that you're probably aware of, to there's a youth centre around the corner from us that we also support. And we also, where we can, we use our buildings as resources as part of our education work. So this is a group of primary school children visiting White Collar Factory, which is a building on Old Street, which has a running track on its roof, which really always goes down well with all kinds of groups visiting. And this is a list of the stuff that we do for ourselves, and we organise these activities. And really, this is just so we can we can decide for ourselves about the attendees and how to support groups of young people and which young people we're engaging with. So we prioritise London State School students, particularly Islington, because that's our home borough. We always prioritise students at AHMM designed schools, so we've got a good relationship with students at Burntwood and Westminster Academy. They'll be invited to all of our activities. We're the Social Mobility Foundation lead for architecture, so they're a fantastic group of students who always engage with our activities. And since going online, we've been able to sort of expand out of London sort of nationally and internationally with online activities, sort of good and bad. One of our key moments is this huge open studio afternoon for young people. I've always thought that it's great that we have work experience and all that kind of thing, but actually reaching a kind of quantitative number of students is fantastic. So I always sort of rather overbook it, and there's usually like over 100 students in the office that afternoon. And the main thing is they're meeting an architect. They can sit across the table and ask an architect all those kind of questions that they want to know about that profession and job role, and also, you know, see the model shop, do some drawing. And, you know, at the very least, they've got something to put on the dreaded UCAS personal statement that they've actually seen a real life architect, which I kind of think, you know, we kind of know that's a sort of important moment. We set up a summer school in 2019, and this was the sort of bringing together of our work experience that we run all the time, but bringing a group together and giving them sessions over the week around sustainability and digital design, architectural drawing, and then working together to design their own buildings. And we were very happy and looking forward to developing that further, but we then, for the last 2 years, have gone online. So it's been a pack of model making materials sent to them and all the sessions online. But it has meant we've engaged with students, you know, as far afield as Uruguay, the rest of England, which actually has worked really well with the Social Mobility Foundation. So good things and bad things, as we all know. And then this is the kind of hump. So this is the Social Value Act. And so lots of us have social value commitments now as part of our projects. So we've worked with Swanley School in Whitechapel since 2017, and they want Tower Hamlets. It's in connection to our Tower Hamlets Town Hall project with Tower Hamlets. So when we first started, we worked with Year 8 high achieving girls groups. This is what the school preferred because we work with the DT department, and the DT department, these students are not interested in DT. So this was the idea that they would be engaged through, you know, coming to our offices and understanding more about architecture. We had quite a spooky visit to the site before work got underway. It was quite strange what medical things have been left behind from the Royal London Hospital. And we've extended, I think we ran these super learning dates for a couple of years. They came into the office. We did model making around ideas of democracy, which sort of fitted with the town hall project. We did some skill sharing around SketchUp, bit of sketching on the roof. Then we moved, they wanted us to help with their GCSE DT coursework. And I was actually very excited about this because actually in terms of evaluating impact, the idea that our architects were working with these students and possibly the grades would go up thanks to the mentoring and advice. But unfortunately, I think these students never took the GCSE, so that was a bit sort of upsetting for everyone, but anyway, that we've carried on. We kind of lost contact with the school for a while, but we're now back on track and delivering GCSE mentoring through emails, and also some workshops, skill sharing workshops. This was an architectural drawing workshop with them. And the second one is West Kentish Town Estate at Camden, and we're working with Haverstock School. We've got very prescriptive social value commitments around employability sessions, apprenticeships, work experience, and work placement. So this is with the young people. And we've tried to be a little bit we try and be a little bit experimental with all of our stuff, because it's just, you just want to push it a bit. So with this one, all of the project team, and actually people outside of the project team, are working with us to run a 1 week work experience with all the elements working together. And I think we use the REBA plan of work to demonstrate to the students how the different professions and expertises work together, but also separately. So they'll do the work experience, and at various moments over the week, which is the first week of Easter, they will have an understanding of how a project is delivered through these joint professions and expertises, which is kind of nice add-on. I hope I'm not overrunning. I can see Hilary. This is okay, so that's it. So this is the fun one. And so I think you spoke about, the time, how much time, and for some reason I got involved just after Christmas with a 6-week project of the primary year 2s in Southwark, at a school in Southwark. And I decided that we should run our summer school, but for them as 6 and 7-year-olds, which was quite mad, really. So teams on a Monday morning, we did a sustainability session. We sent them lots of materials from our materials library so they could feel them and talk about different materials and climate and the weather and how architects decide what to use. And then I got our interiors guy, and he talked to them about colour and interiors. And we just got some amazing outputs, and they don't mind teams. They come up and talk to you and show you their work. So it's actually a very fun Monday morning. Then very, very foolishly took them to Mudshoot City Farm. And this is probably the 5 minutes when it didn't rain. There was a lot of crying, but there's some really great architectural drawing. They were doing the 3 little pigs, and we talked about animal habitats and how to draw them. And then this amazing model making that I showed on the first slide. And I was like, oh, that was great. But, it was kind of just to be part of this program. And then one of our architects said, oh, have we done anything in a primary school? Because we've just been asked for a social value bid. So I was thinking, oh, this is why, so you do it for the fun of it and the enjoyment. And then hopefully it also feeds into these rather more sort of formalized processes if necessary. So I was just going to finish with a picture of the famous Neil Pinder and an AHMM event that we supported with him. And that's it from me. Oh, sorry, I'll try and stop. Let me try the stop sharing. There we go.
Brilliant, thank you. So now we're going to hear from Anna Davies. Anna, are you ready to share?
Ready, I'm going to go for it.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, can everyone see that? Yeah, so I'm sure we're going to touch on many similar themes to Claire, but at David Miller Architects, we're really an SME. So we'll talk about the internal activities we do around social value, and also the external programs we work with. So we are a practice of about 24 with offices in London and Liverpool. Our work is fairly typical of an SME, so housing, education, commercial fit-out projects. But there are 2 kind of aspects of how we work that might set us apart from other firms. So one is our reputation at being at the forefront of digital design and modern methods of construction, and the other is our commitment to delivering social value through our projects. So I'd like to share today with how we do that and why we do this. So our motivation for social value is in 3 phases. It's developed over time. Firstly, it was from an ethics point of view. We really strongly believe in a level playing field for all. So if you're passionate about design and building, your background shouldn't prevent you from being able to consider a career in architecture. We believe like a diverse team helps to develop the best solutions to the projects. And as architects, our team needs to relate to the communities that we work in, and typically the profession is not very diverse. We've also noticed a lack of parental networks limits the students from getting valuable work experience placements. And when the tuition fees were introduced, we were concerned that there might be a potential for only students with means to actually consider architecture as a course. So we were therefore quite motivated to do something about it and open up opportunities for all that we could, so we could attract the broadest talent pool. Secondly, we thought that we understood the staff benefits and the opportunities to develop important new skills, especially within the junior members of our team. So through work placements, they would get an opportunity to improve and practice their management skills by supervising the work experience students, learning how to brief them clearly and setting deadlines. Also working on pro bono community projects allows them to take a lead role and develop their skills further. And we get really good feedback from the team, so that they really enjoy doing these activities because we managed to carve out time within their day-to-day working to be able to do it. And finally, I think Claire's also touched on, and Hilary is a kind of strong commercial sense, was our kind of third driver. And again, the Social Value Act, clients started asking us on publicly funded projects what social value we were going to deliver to win the contracts, and that demand we've seen increase. So basically our social value commitment can win or lose us valuable projects. So in about 2010, 11, we decided to try and set out our CSR strategy so we could communicate and quantify what we are doing and why. And our main target is to encourage new and diverse talent into the built environment. So not just architecture, we're happy to have anyone who's got an interest in the built environment. And to do this, we provided pre-pandemic 16 week-long placements per year. So this was, we've been doing this since about 2014. And actually from this process, we've been recruiting people. So I think 7 to date, 3 were from sixth form placements. And they've been recruited onto our permanent team once they had gone through university. And there's a picture of Sue Crage here. And she was a student at a school that we worked on with Bouygues, a contractor. And she came to us for work experience. And she loved it so much, she wanted to study architecture at Edinburgh University. And then she came back to work with us. So once the pandemic struck, we realised we had to do something that would mean we could still provide valuable experience to students who were interested in the construction industry. And especially, or personally, I think that 16 to 18-year-olds were probably one of the hardest groups hit by the pandemic, and it definitely wasn't fair for them to then miss out on crucial work experience as well. So we created a virtual platform, which we call the Virtual Design Academy, which would host all the information for a student's week-long placement, and also some other useful tips about how to get into architecture or different routes and information available. And what we did is we grouped our volunteer mentors within the office with students and communicated over Teams. So it really mimicked the same way the office was working. And at the end of the week, the students had a portfolio of their design, running from site analysis, client brief development, concept design, and to learning Revit and producing their designs in BIM, which is a software Revit's a software we use. And again, we really want to mimic the real world. So at the end of the week, we asked them all to do a 10-minute presentation to the office over Teams with a question and answer session as well And it was amazing because although we thought that might sound quite daunting, we were so impressed by the confidence that the students had when they were presenting, and their ideas were super impressive as well. So we've carried out 3 week-long VDAs since lockdown and managed to reach about 30 students in London and the Northwest. Oh, sorry. So we also provide apprenticeships to offer different pathways into the practice. Now this began with Jess, who was one of the red dress, and she joined us post A-levels as our first apprentice for business and professional administration. And within 3 years, she was our practice manager in charge of the day steering of the practice. And then another Jess became Jess's first apprentice, and she's now worked with us for nearly 5 years, and she got her higher level apprenticeship in business and professional administration in October. And come September, we'll begin to study a master's at TET in sustainability and behaviour change, which we're really excited about because that will just give us another angle within the practice. She's also kind of a digital native, so she has introduced loads of super efficient cloud-based finance and project management tools that's really helped us. And then we've got our newest member of our apprenticeships is Tessa, and she started with us and then realised that actually architecture was the thing that she wanted to do. So she's now working with us part-time and doing her architecture degree. We are really committed to offer architectural apprenticeships, but we're just waiting to work back in the office full-time so that we can support the training and development of that. So maybe by September. So in terms of external programs and partnerships we work with Placed. They're a Liverpool-based social enterprise that helps people of all ages and backgrounds engage in planning and design through community engagement and consultations. We've supported them over the last 2 years as sponsors, but also as ambassadors, with 3 of the Liverpool team participating in their education academies, which kind of provide a mentoring role. And the programs began in person, but then they went virtual during lockdown. But that actually worked quite successfully, thankfully. We also have worked with the RIBA on mentoring schemes in Westminster and the Northwest. And it's an initiative set up to give undergraduate architecture students an introduction into the working life. So this is just a picture of us taking a group of students to visit the DMA's refurbishment of the Lord's Media Centre as part of the mentoring programme. And it was great to see the excitement from the students and to learn sort of what had happened and have a first-hand account of how it was achieved. So that was great. And then in Liverpool, we worked with the students to develop their portfolios for applying for jobs. We also work directly with schools. So the Sir Milton Westminster UTC and Sir Joseph's College through Class of Your Own to offer the Design Engineer Construct, which we sponsored for 2 years to enable them to run their GCSE equivalent. But we often on many projects, we do a lot of education. So we run a lot of workshops with the students to just kind of help them to sort of engage with the projects, but also to give them kind of career advice if they want it, or help with their personal statements for uni applications. So nearly finished now. So these are just a few of the programs and organisations that we enjoy working with and that we've seen deliver tangible results to our business. And another sort of aspect of it is that we also look for organisations that we can provide fundraising help to. So this is an example of what we've done for Clare House, which is a project we're working in the Northwest. So the next phase of our responsible business journey is to become a B Corp, because we think it kind of communicates on an international level that we act as a responsible business in all aspects of our work, and it ensures that the responsible business becomes like embedded in our company ethos going forward. So that's it from me.
Brilliant, thank you very much. That was really interesting. I'm really interested in all of the different ways of talking to young people in schools and how we get them involved. Brilliant. Let's go over to Mellis now.
Thank you, Hilary. Let me try and share and make it. Has that gone full size, Hilary? Yeah. Well, I think it's maybe a good thing. I'm coming from quite a different angle. Maybe I read the briefing notes slightly differently, or maybe I just wanted to share sort of my personal angle on delivering social value. My name's Mellis Howard. I'm director at Archio Architects, and I mean, on paper, yeah, we work in housing, lots of community-led housing. We're really fortunate to work in some quite interesting niches like co-housing and community land trusts, etc. And I think that our kind of ambition as a company is to create inclusive regeneration. And so what I'm going to talk about is really about the people and the process, in a way, how we really passionate about drawing on lived experience. And it's a slightly different angle, I appreciate, in the previous two talks, but I think it's how we work with young people to deliver like extra social value through our projects more than through our kind of external work. And I was thinking about how am I going to frame the work we do with young people and our passion for embedding social value in all of our projects. And I thought back to this photo from actually years ago, but for a community land trust in South London. And when we started working on it in partnership with a community group called Lewisham Citizens, we thought about how we could embolden young people in the area through the processes we're doing. Rather than create a new framework, we thought, how can we involve them in the process we are already doing that will deliver like extra benefits for the local community. So on the left, there's Susan, who's a local interiors, she's a local person who happened to be walking through the site. She happens to be an interior designer or a student at the time. And she became one of our steering group for this project. In the middle, we've got David, who was the son of someone who we met through a campaign group, but we were looking for people who wanted opportunities to take part in our project. And he was looking to get experience in order to do a workshop with the BBC in terms of reporting, which through this work, he managed to get that workshop, etc. Ione in the blue shirt was one of our staff, but I'm really proud that she was one of the first cohort of public practice. And I think a lot of her work with engaging directly with communities gave her that evidence base with which to win that role. And Katie on the right is a local resident who's also a filmmaker and was looking for new opportunities for like testing out her documentary filmmaking. So used our workshop as a chance to do that. And I suppose that's really what I'm talking about. For us, social value is about engaging with local people at every stage and looking for opportunities to genuinely involve people in the community for their benefit. Let me see if I can move on here. So yeah, this is just a bit of background. This was the first day on this project for London Community Land Trust, where we brought our workshop onto the site to engage with local people, having actually been voted for by the local people in a terrifying, oh no, it's done that thing where it's gone onto slideshow. I'm just going to do it like this. I did test it beforehand. We also spent a lot of time with the site neighboured a primary school, and we thought that was a real opportunity to engage with the primary school directly. And we had 2 or 3 workshops with lots of the students. And I guess from our perspective, I have to be honest, part of it was about risk management. They were next to the school and the playground was going to be greatly affected. But we also thought this is an extraordinary opportunity for the children, particularly in the younger years, to understand that something is going to happen on this site and then to see it next to their playground be built over years. So we've been working with the school for a number of years, letting them know about the process. And I think we were always cognizant that development can feel like something that happens to you rather than something that happens with you. But so by engaging with the school before anything happened, before we had any plans, we felt like they would be aware that something was happening and they were understanding it rather than being shocked that something's being built. And to be honest, they became advocates for the scheme, which was fantastic when I imagine there were lots of parents nervous about this development on the site. And people becoming advocates for a scheme is something we really care about and really aim for in our projects. And we were really proud that so many people who were involved in the process for this particular project ended up hand delivering the planning application to the Mayor of Lewisham. And actually we've got so many letters of support that it nearly got pulled because they thought something untoward was going on, which was quite stressful. And I was proud also recently that the same project was featured in Claire Benny's report as a good practice example for engagement. The project's on site at the moment, and the allocations for new residents continue. We're also pleased to continue the relationship with local school children, involving them in the art project for the mural and in the future for a permanent artwork, which again, you know, as the two previous panelists had talked about, having something that you can demonstrate experience and evidence of being involved in something that's really happening is really fundamental for these young people. But maybe to take a slightly sideways step, I also think that engaging with young people is really about engaging very genuinely and really allowing people into your design process. So at Archio, we have like a number of tools. In fact, I made this slide ages ago, and there's maybe twice as many now. There's lots of different tools to engage with people. And in a way, we've spoken about all the different types of ways of having workshops and mentoring. And I think it's exactly the same when you're coming to real projects. There's lots of different ways to engage with people that make it transparent and interesting and purposeful, to make sure that what you're doing is appropriate and genuine. And this seems like a funny thing to mention, but when we talk to young people about our projects, we also talk to them about the program in a way that is digestible. So this is one of our flow charts for talking to people about a development process. It happens to be for a co-housing project, but the point being it's legible, it allows people into the process and they understand where they are in this timeline of development. This was a really, the project I mentioned at the beginning was actually quite a while ago. And since then, we've always been asking ourselves, how can we improve our process engaging, particularly with young people? So this project here is for the Astley estate. It just recently got planning for Southwark Council. And on the face of it, it's 20 social rent homes, part of an estate regeneration. But what we really wanted to do in this process was to ensure that young people were genuine participators in the design. And I think we always talk about putting our ego at the door, not coming to a process thinking we know the answers, and basically saying, we don't have the lived experience of this estate. You tell us, you know, what's really going on. And I think we were really keen to have all ages represented. So when we started the project, we met the brilliant, I can't fault them, the tenants management organisation. And we talked about kind of various issues that were blighting the estate. And we felt like it wasn't being said explicitly, but the kind of issues were stemming from their perception of young people. And where we couldn't find young people to join the group, you know, it's not necessarily the most exciting thing to do, is join an evening set. We couldn't convince them in any case. What we did was reach out to a charity called the Young Advisors. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they have a lot of different branches around the country. And what's extraordinary is these young people are, they have been trained to become experts in built environment. They're really, really impressive. So where we couldn't find a young person from the estate, we asked the Young Advisors to represent the young person's voice in the conversation. And what was extraordinary, and this picture, by the way, is a kind of summary of conversations that took place over many months in different formats. And it was sort of around here that we started to feel that we needed to not be careful to limit the use of spaces by young people. So we brought in the Young Advisors. I think it was absolutely an extraordinary moment because they offered the other side of the coin when it came to what some of the other tenants felt was creating kind of behavioural issues. And it meant that where some people had said, let's limit the amount of seating, let's limit the amount of gathering, the young people were able to say, all we have is this space. Actually, can we improve it? Can we make it safer, lighter, more visible so that you're not worried about what we're doing because you can see it? And so rather than diminishing what they were going to be given, we exceeded on that. And I'm proud that the scheme kind of, I suppose it was useful that it sailed through planning, but it also delivers a lot of benefits beyond the kind of traditional red line boundary of the architecture. So I haven't touched on any of our like mentoring work. And I suppose as well, the previous presenter, we are an SME who can't do nearly as much as the first presenter, but we do what we can. And we're working with people like the Mayor's Fund for London, and really for years have been working with the Social Mobility Foundation. But I suppose, again, we always try and expand on these themes in whatever we're doing within our kind of day-to-day work. So when Kyle and I were teaching at the Bartlett, actually in 2020, I'm personally very, let's say, critical of how architecture students generally keep design discussions within a kind of architecture school silo. And so our brief in the Bartlett asked the students to design instruments to start conversations. And it was really about engaging with communities. So very un-Bartlett-y, we went out and we met with a genuine community to test their schemes. And it was a partnership between our client, Phoenix Housing, which is an extraordinary housing association, and our students. And what was very inspiring is that it was perhaps some of the most sort of insightful commentary on architecture that I think they would have ever got, because it was, again, demonstrating that lived experience is so valuable to architecture discourse. And I suppose I was proud to see the young people have such genuine conversations with real residents. And just to finish on a slight provocation, we partnered with Southwark Young Advisors on a kind of let's say our provocation is that we think that 18 to 24-year-olds should be statutory consultees of any housing development in their area. I think from my personal perspective, it's so obvious that it's their future. They're the only ones around the table who, well, they will be the most affected by climate change. And I think that their fear about climate change should be heard more often by those who make decisions. And also, they ask the best questions, frankly, every time I've done an engagement process like this. So that's my my hope, that they become statutory consultees for future planning applications. Sorry for my slides going.
No, that's good, brilliant, thank you, Mellis. So you're making a call for Young People England to go with the new Active Travel England that we've got as a statutory consultee organisation.
Nothing will be enough.
Brilliant. Okay, so now we're going to go over to Shawn. Do keep your questions in the chat, and hopefully at the end we'll have a little bit of a time to go through some of them. But if we note them there, everyone will get to see them. Brilliant. Thank you. Over to Shawn.
Hi everyone. Do tell me if you can see this. I know it's been a few years, but my Zoom capabilities are still lagging behind.
We can see it. Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Perfect. So, hi everyone. My name is Shawn Adams. I'm a co-founder of Poor Collective. As you can see, the graphic that's brightly flashing is an acronym for Power Out of Restriction. But who are we? So I actually teach at Central St. Martin. So. But my background's in architecture, so I'm still training to become an architect, but I'm working in practice and teaching at the moment. So 3 of the members in Poor Collective have an architectural background, and then Matt has a background in accountancy. But what kind of brings us together is an acute awareness of the need for young voices to be platformed and for communities to be heard. So to say a little bit about our organisation, our vision is a world where youth see no limit, whilst our mission is that Poor Collective focuses on the development of communities through the elevation of young people. And I think we kind of have to dwell on this a little bit, because I think it's important, especially in the UK, to think about what has happened over the last 10 years with the cutting of youth facilities, the slashing of youth centres, the amount of public funding that is no longer being invested into young people. And I think that is something that we're seeing, and we want to increasingly try and provide opportunities for young people by upskilling them, teaching them kind of architectural and design related skills, but also giving them the opportunity to really feel as if they have a stake in their local environment. So what we do, what we essentially do is consult with either kind of big organizations, local communities, kind of local authorities, and we work with young people collaboratively to actually design something tangible, but also upskill them to allow them to create this tangible output, which we think is really important. So whilst we think it's important to engage young people, we also think it's really important that we upskill young people and give them the tools to actually be able to kind of make an impact in their local environment. So it isn't only about speaking to them, it's about giving them the methods and the agency to actually do things in their neighborhood. So one example of this, and our kind of most recent example, is a project called Bringing Home to the Unknown, which was a collaborative project with the Royal Institute of British Architects, which originally began as part of their ambassadors program, where they team up with our architecture practice, and they architects will go into schools and speak to young people. So what we did was we worked with young people from Maysbrook Park School. So Maysbrook Park School is an alternative provision school in East London. So these are young people that are some of the most vulnerable in the city, who are no longer allowed to go to mainstream school. So you have to kind of really be really sensitive and be very careful with what you say and how you kind of act around these young people. That being said, they were a fantastic bunch of young people, and we worked with them over a series of 6 workshops, showing them the kind of some architectural tools, but also teaching them about architecture, because I think it's something that they were completely unaware about. They kind of had this was their first introduction to any kind of creative industry, let alone architecture. So we kind of, through these workshops, we taught them about architecture. We had a workshop about maths, and we weaved in very different, quite different subjects into this creative proposal, which kind of amalgamated into a series of benches and a canopy. So through these workshops, we did a series of different things. We got them to draw plans, draw kind of sections. They did these collages, which they didn't really know what they were making to begin with, but they kind of gradually eased their way into it. But what is quite interesting is, even though we did things that were quite different in terms of what they thought architecture was, we wanted them to have this output that they could kind of speak to and feel as if they've kind of created something. So what you can see here is on the opening day of the installation that we co-designed with the young people, and they're kind of they were in front of the installation and spoke about it. And I think what was quite powerful about this is, during the process of these workshops, we helped them kind of with speaking skills, presenting, and not only the design. So as you can kind of see here, this was the final output. So it was a kind of colorful mix of shapes which the students designed. So I think what is important within the work that we do is that whilst we have architectural training, we guide the young people and allow them to take the reins of the design. So we're kind of stepping back, and I think there's something quite powerful about that, because you get some of the most kind of thoughtful and interesting and intricate designs when you give young people agency. So here's a few shots of it. So this is in Regent's Park over the summer. It was lucky enough to be during a time where the Frieze Art Fair was, so a few people kind of stumbled across it. But as you can kind of see, it was engaged with quite a lot with young people. And I think what was important here was the fact that it was designed by young people, so it made it easier for other young people to engage it. So whenever we kind of walked past, there was a series of young people kind of playing on the installation. And this is kind of the final shot. I'll quickly go through one other project, which is slightly different, but it's the same principles. Carney's mural. This was essentially a mural that we worked up in collaboration with the Royal College of Art and young people that went to Carney's community centre in Southwest London. So these were young people that were using boxing was essentially an outlet. So a lot of these kids that actually went to this boxing gym had been kicked out of school, or they had behavioural issues, so they were kind of referred to the community centre by either their schools or by people in the local community. So working with these young people, we we set out to design a mural on a quite neglected exterior wall that was adjacent to the actual building. So the community centre is kind of like this warren of different opportunities. So it has a boxing gym, a music studio, a kind of kitchen where some of the young people were learning how to cook, but also a bike workshop, which you can see on the picture on the right. So with that all in mind, we wanted to create a mural that celebrated each of these individual aspects, but also gave the young people something to be proud of as people kind of walk and meander down the street towards Battersea Park. So working with the young people, we kind of set out a design, and then we prepared the wall for them to start to paint. So as you can kind of see here, we kind of took a back seat, and the young people, once they had kind of put together the design, were able to paint the mural. So it wasn't only about just simply designing it was about how could they be engaged in the process. So they would design it, paint it, and feel as if they own this part of their neighborhood. And then this was the final output. What you can see here is a series of kind of geometrical shapes that is covered by a sequence of icons. And I think what is really important about this project is that each icon represented something that was incredibly meaningful for each and every one of the young people that goes to the boxing gym. So on the far right, you can see that's meant to be a kind of abstraction of the Doddington estate where the majority of the young people grew up. As we move in, you see the pizza that represents the kitchen, the guitar, which represents the music studio. The graphic in the center is the Carney's community logo. To the left of that is the ring and two boxing gloves, where we had put a small tribute to two of the young people that had sadly been murdered. And then to the left there is the bike, a symbol showing the bike. So it is really meaningful for them, and I think it's something that they're often taking pictures in front of and doing the kind of bike repairs in front of. So I think this is kind of something that speaks to the power of young people kind of coming together and having the tools to really kind of change a part of their environment, even if it's as simple as painting a neglected wall. And to kind of wrap up, the final kind of thing that we do is we work with young people to not only design kind of installations and murals, but also we worked with young people on kind of showcasing their work. So this was a project which were part of the People's Pavilion project, where young people in this kind of exhibition were able to celebrate some of their designs for the pavilion, and this is a few shots of the opening. So we had on our website had a voting system where young people, and well, not only young people, but people were able to design. I mean, they were able to vote for their favorite design by the young people, and I think the votes, we got over 1,400 votes for the winning design. So it was quite successful in terms of getting people engaged with checking out the work of young people. So thank you for watching, and yeah, I hope you guys have a few questions.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So we do have lots of questions in the chat that we can go through. There's been lots of really interesting discussion. I'm just going to we've had such a range of things. We've got questions here. I think questions and comments about the difference between actually how we ask people and how we engage people. And I think there's something really interesting there about how we make sure we don't ask such open questions that no one can answer. Like, what do you want? Well, I don't know. What are you offering? It's like when someone in my family says, what can I bring? I don't know. Can't answer that question. But you need a suggestion. You need a starting point. So I think that's a really important thing. Do any of the panelists have got any good experience of how you might frame a question to make sure, or a sort of discussion with young people, so that it's something that they can more easily answer?
Can I answer that one, Hilary?
Yeah.
Yeah, on the same project we started with, the one in Lewisham, we had, you get to a certain point where there's only so much you can ask people what they think, you know, which brick. We actually tried to open up for them to choose the brick, but the planners thought that was too risky. Anyway, we wanted the young people in the estate to have an influence on the landscape design. And so rather than just going with a blank piece of paper and saying, what do you want? First of all, we did a landscape kind of tour around local good bits of placemaking so that we could start the conversation. Sort of, I suppose people are talking about educating through the process. So it was about, and then understanding, so they could think, yes, no, I would enjoy that, I wouldn't, because it's much easier than seeing it on a piece of paper. In any case, then it came down to, we all met back again and talked about their daily routines and what's missing from that and what this piece of public realm could deliver for that. So I suppose in my way of framing the question was first of all to educate and then to talk about lived experience and not to say, as you say, Hilary, what do you want? But look for the benefits through the process. That's what we're always trying to do. In the end, they totally shocked us with what they wanted. Because we sort of thought, you know, we're always talking about leave your ego at the door. We thought foolishly that they wanted growing space and all the rest. Of course they didn't. They're 18. They want somewhere to like make a mess and jump about, you know. And so it's a hard landscaping with some rocks and benches so they can kind of pull up a barbecue, pull up a chair. And that suited a lot of the other people in the estate too. And again, so all those processes along the way, don't pose the question until you've sort of opened the question first, I suppose.
So I think there's an important point in what you're saying, which is sometimes you've got to be open and listening to hear what people's questions and issues are, but actually the solutions don't necessarily come that way. But then there's a fine line between, you've got to choose one of these. Actually, if you don't choose that one, I'm not going to be happy with it, which is sometimes how these engagement things go.
Yeah.
Don't ask a question that you don't want an answer to. It's the thing I always think about when you're doing engagement. If I don't offer anything that I'm not willing to, that this project can do, but to think about that range of questions. Have any of you got anything that, as a bit like Mellis said, genuinely the answer that came back wasn't what they were expecting? Has anyone got any things that is genuinely different? And I would definitely echo that view that young people just want a space that they can be and that people aren't going to moan about them most of the time. But has anyone had feedback that they've thought, or it kind of on a project where they've thought, wow, I did not expect that to be what they were interested in?
Well, I guess this is kind of a funny take on it and not really feasible, but I think the idea of a lived experience is a good way of getting the conversation flowing. So, for example, for our school projects, when we go in to talk to some of the classes, we actually say, you know, begin by talking through their school day, because it kind of opens up more avenues as to how to sort of then phrase further questions. But so we did that in one exercise, and we kind of mapped out their school day and like drawings and ripping pieces of paper apart. And then that led on to, you know, spaces that they'd really like to go through in their school day. And one of them was a shark tank as part of their swimming pool. So, you know, that could happen. But I know that's just a silly example, but I just love the fact that they drew it and they put loads of detail into it. And, you know, it was really something that they wanted. So you never know, that might happen.
Well, getting people to think much more broadly than they can only have the things they know. Just some of the ideas out there that can be much bigger than that is really exciting. Just introducing, you know, it doesn't have to be the same thing as everything always is. And sometimes things are possible. So that's really interesting. Anyone else, anything else that came out that was just completely not what you were expecting? No? Shawn or Claire?
I mean, I've got examples where it's not completely like left the field, but like for example, when we're doing the mural, it was in southwest London, so we were like, oh, so like Battersea Park, or I don't know, like Battersea Power Station, like these are the kind of iconic spaces that people kind of always speak about. But then the young people just like, yeah, like Donington Estate, and it's like, well, don't you want something that's more iconic? And like, no. Or like even with the installation, some of the young people in the beginning, we were like we were just saying maybe we just do benches, and then one of the young person like, you know what, I want a canopy because sometimes I hang out like where the trolleys are in Asda, And they're like, these are kind of things that you would never be able to kind of come up with yourself, because it's so kind of specific to that young person and their lived experience. So it's like, you just assume, all right, this looks good, or this is something that I know. But then you recognize that, wow, I'm so like, I've got to be kind of quite humble, because like, I'm so different from the young people that I'm trying to design and work with.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I work mainly with workshops rather than on kind of real life stuff. And I think I always just try and be like really open, and I'm always surprised. And I think the problem is you kind of think, oh, young people, they like bright colors, or young people, they like this. And actually some of them are really into gothic dystopia. Some of them are very shy and they don't want to tell you. Some of them are like, oh no, they want my views. Oh God. You know what I mean? Like my daughter used to just switch into consultation mode when I took her to yet another architecture event. I could see the look on, and I kind of think you have to be like really aware that they're not this big lump. They are like, they're so different, and like, it's the fun of it and the interest of what they are into that's so unexpected. Like, I don't know, I can't really give you a good answer, but I think that's always like stuck with me, the fact that they just have weird and strange ideas like we all do, and like just having to kind of summarize which one to take forward is like the interesting thing. So not a very helpful answer, but kind of like that, more expect the unexpected, and actually it's going to be more interesting than you ever thought.
But that's good, because then we can also reflect on the fact that actually asking one young person isn't really enough. You can't ask all young people, but you need to ask a range of people. And much as with any kind of workshops or anything you're doing, you need to think, okay, who am I talking to here? And am I talking to people with a range of views? Is it, what am I getting? And seeing how people feed off each other as well. Just sort of the conversation goes, and they can be part of that. So I think that's a really interesting thing to think about. What might different children or different young people want, because they don't all want the same thing. They're not one homogeneous group. Apologies, my phone keeps ringing. I'll shut it up now.
Yeah, we're doing a little bit of, we work sometimes with the Magpie Project, which is a charity over in Newham for mums and under fives in temporary accommodation. And they're just doing a brief for a new space. And they were sort of talking to the mums and to the children, the under fives. And they're saying, oh, like this child like needs to have a really quiet space. And this child just wants to play really lively because they haven't got much room. And, so I think just like, that's sort of, I always think the shy ones don't get much say, and actually we should have a whole consultation around, well, shy is probably, the more kind of quiet, reserved ones as well. I think I might have a project of that at work now. It's given me that idea.
Well, I think shy, but also thinking about neurodiversity and actually how children's different ways of engaging with you sometimes might relate to how they engage with the world. And that can sometimes be really helpful. It's a whole area that I think the architecture world and built environment world hasn't particularly engaged with yet, but I think increasingly we will have to, and think about not only how we talk to more neurodiverse people with different needs, but actually how we then make environments that deal with that as well. Thinking about playable environments and things. There is a question in the chat for Mellis about whether your engagement toolkit is something that they can have a look at, or is it something that you just use for projects for yourselves, which I wouldn't blame you, but is that what it is?
No, it's a bit of company, I don't know how to do it. Why didn't we message and we'll talk about it? I don't know, I'm being really loose, vague there. I was going to say, can I say something about the point that was being made before? I think one of the things that where the crossover between project work and kind of outreach work, because there was this evening's talk has taken kind of it's got two big different angles to it. When we did some mentoring with the Mayor's Fund for London, have an amazing system which you can kind of plug into, and we connected through them with some schools close to the Athley estate that I was showing earlier. And one of the ways that we kind of also benefited from the process was asking those young people who were our mentors, who were getting architectural experience, to critique our plans And one of the things we always feel there's not enough of in housing is storage. And I get what a 39-year-old mother of 2 needs to store, but I don't know what an 18-year-old these days needs to store. Like, life has moved on. So we just had a kind of whole session about how they use their own homes and what they need space for. And, you know, and I would say that just to reiterate, like asking people about their understanding people's position and their lived experience can happen in both ways, through projects and also through kind of outreach that we could all do. And I suppose looking for ways that we benefit from it as architecture practices, I think makes it richer too. And I suppose it's another example of asking genuine questions. So that's the kind of crossover that I also think is particularly interesting.
Yeah. Brilliant. I think, unless we've got any other particular burning questions, I'm just going to kind of try and summarise where we've got to and bring this evening to a close. We've had 4 brilliant talks. So thank you very much to our speakers. We've covered a massive range of things. We've covered, so this is the thing, it's that social value is confirmed as, for young people, social value is a massive, massive group of things. It can be work experience, getting people to understand what a job is, what the built environment professions are, actually just that you can influence the world around you, and that how the world around you is shaped is something really important that they can be involved in. With training and mentoring, and that might be for people directly who want to be involved in built environment professions, but actually just getting people to think a little bit about their aspirations and where they want to go and what they want to do. Particularly, we've heard about projects, how thinking about engaging with young people delivers social value through how people inform and shape and are part of the making of projects, and that can really help people's confidence, self-esteem, and their sense of being part of the community. We're hearing about making change where young people need it, listening to where young people need space, how they can feel that they can own that space, sometimes by designing and making it and impacting it on themselves. And I think that ownership is really important, that thing of allowing young people to feel comfortable in space and in the places that they visit is something that it can be quite hard for an adult to understand. Like, I don't go over there, I just don't go there, but I would walk that way. And my map of how I use those spaces is probably entirely different from a young person's. And we don't know that unless we listen to young people in those places. I think the raising awareness of what the built environment is, I think a lot of people aren't aware that these things come about because of decisions, and either good decisions or unintentional bad decisions, and that actually there is a way to impact and change the way street spaces and these places work. But young people don't know that unless we talk to them about it. The point that Shawn made about elevating young people's role, not just seeing them as secondary to the project and the people who automatically bring themselves to any discussion being the ones who have the most say, going out and finding the young people to talk to if they don't come to you directly, and making sure that they're never missed, and that we use any opportunity we can on projects to involve them, but also on sort of programs and outreach to kind of give them the tools should that come along as something they can do later, and really letting them be seen and heard. And I think that's one of the most valuable things that we can do. Some of the slides have been really valuable in terms of just recording and showing what people have said. It's one thing to say it to an architect or to someone in an engagement session. It's another thing to see what you value written on a wall or posted on a website, and knowing that other people also hear and want to value what you've said. So I think that's a really important thing too. So hearing that voice. So I think that all leads us to a really broad description of what social value is. But the one thing I think we all have kind of really been thinking about as well, but we haven't necessarily focused on it specifically, is being really clear what the impact of the work is, because we want social value work to have an impact on people's lives and on places. And so we need to think carefully about what that might be with an open mind when we start this work. How do we want to deliver that change, and actually how do we want to deliver that value? And then I think the most important question is thinking, how do we frame those questions? How do we invite people in to that conversation, whatever kind of conversation it is? So thank you very much. I've really enjoyed the questions in the chat. I've really enjoyed all the talks. And I look forward to picking up this conversation with some or many of you in the future. I'm now going to hand back to Victoria. Thank you.
Thanks, thanks very much, Hilary, and thanks everybody. I think it's been such an important conversation that we've had. It's the sort of beginning of another journey, but I think it really is one that's really taking place. But also that we're getting to a point where it shows that actually all practices, anybody, any practice, any firm can get engaged with young people at a small scale or a big scale, but actually everybody can do something. And if we all do that, if you just think of the number of organizations and practices, etc., across the built environment, what impact we can have as a group, as a whole. And I think this is one of our key things here, that bringing everybody to show the benefits of it through many different ways, but it also benefits to practice, but obviously to the young people is obviously our key driver for our own roadmap. So thanks everybody for a brilliant time, inspirational as usual, great conversation, great questions, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Just to remind those who are doing schools projects, the Architecture and Schools scheme will be opening on the 14th of March, and there will be a category talking about collaboration. So do spread the word, because we want to actually engage with schools, school teachers, and those who are directly working with them one way or another, to create another incredible scheme, award scheme that we started last year with the Inspiring Future Generations. So thanks very much, and look forward to seeing you at another time very shortly. And thank you, everybody.